Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing our lens on professional architectural photography.
hmm
Maybe you're thinking about a career change, or you just want to make your portfolio, really stand out, or maybe you just love capturing buildings.
Yeah, exactly. And we've pulled together some key ideas from someone who's been doing this for like 20 years, plus a really useful guide, the 10 best architecture photography tips
Mm.
for folks wanting to go pro.
Right?
So think of this as getting the essential stuff, how to move beyond just quick snaps and actually tell a story with your photos of buildings.
Okay, so our mission today is really extracting that actionable advice, those core ideas, to help you see and shoot architecture like a professional.
Let's do it.
All right, where do we start? Something that seems basic but is, well, clearly super important: timing and light.
Oh, absolutely critical.
Yeah.
It's not just about if there's light, but what kind of light it is.
Mhm.
Our sources really hammer this home. You need to scout locations, see them at different times of day.
Hmm.
Like take the golden hour, right after sunrise, right before sunset.
Yeah, that magic light.
Exactly. It's soft, it's warm, and it makes the shape and the texture of the building pop. Think about low sun hitting brickwork or stone.
Oh, yeah, you see all the little details then.
Totally. Midday sun just flattens everything out in comparison.
Yeah,
It's amazing for like old churches with lots of stonework.
makes sense. That beautiful glow you see in photos. And then the guide also talks about the blue hour. Sounds different.
It is. It's cooler, more cinematic, maybe. Really good for modern buildings, especially ones with their own lighting systems.
Ah, okay, so the cool outdoor light mixes with the warmer indoor or feature lights.
Precisely. Creates a great mood, often quite dramatic. And we shouldn't forget night photography either, capturing the building's lights, the city glow. It's a whole different ballgame.
For sure. And it's not just guesswork, right? The sources mention planning tools.
Yeah, things like photo pills or the photographer's ephemeris, they're pretty essential for pros. They let you figure out exactly where the sun or moon will be, how the shadows will fall.
So you can plan your shot way in advance.
Right. Pre-visualization, that's a big part of professional work.
Okay, so light and timing are locked in. What about getting the shot itself sharp and steady? Sounds like there's one piece of kit that's non-negotiable.
You guessed it, a tripod. Both sources are really clear on this. It's not just about avoiding camera shake, though that's part of it.
Right, the guide says it lets you use lower ISOs and longer exposures. Why is that so key?
Okay, so lower ISO means less digital noise, basically cleaner, more detailed pictures. A tripod means the camera is perfectly still, so you can leave the shutter open longer to let more light in, without bumping up the ISO and getting that grainy look.
Ah, gotcha. Especially important in low light then.
Definitely. And those longer exposures, because you're on a tripod, also let you do cool things like blurring people walking by, which we can talk about later, or just capture dimly lit spaces beautifully.
Makes perfect sense. And tripods are needed for some fancier techniques too.
For sure. Like HDR, high dynamic range. That's where you take several shots at different brightness levels.
Right, for scenes with really bright bits and really dark bits, like looking out a window from inside.
Exactly that. You blend them later. A tripod makes sure all those shots line up perfectly.
Huh.
And for really big buildings, you might use a special panoramic head on the tripod to stitch multiple images together seamlessly.
Okay, solid foundation, good light. Now what about perspective? Getting those building lines straight instead of looking like they're falling over.
Yeah, that's a classic challenge. Architectural distortion. Especially with tall buildings and wide lenses, those vertical lines just want to lean in.
So how do pros deal with that? Tilt-shift lenses get mentioned a lot.
They do. They're kind of the top tier tool. They let you physically shift the lens up or down or side to side without tilting the whole camera.
Ah, so the camera stays level, but the lens moves to get the top of the building in.
Exactly. Keeps those vertical lines perfectly straight. Really important for, accuracy, especially for client work.
But they're expensive, right?
Yeah.
Are there other options?
Definitely. Software is really powerful now. Things like Lightroom or DxO Viewpoint can correct perspective distortion pretty well after you take the shot.
Okay.
And a simpler trick the guide mentions, just back up. Move further away from the building and use a slightly longer lens. That naturally reduces that leaning effect.
Right, changing your angle. That makes sense. But the guide also warned about wide-angle lenses generally.
Yeah, it calls it wide-angle lens abuse, which sounds a bit dramatic, but the point is, while they get a lot in the frame, they can really stretch and distort things near the edges if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Makes things look unnatural sometimes. It's a balance.
Okay, good to keep in mind. Now let's talk detail. We want sharp, well-composed shots. The guide really pushes shooting in raw format. Why is that so crucial?
Okay, think of it like this. A JPEG photo is like a plate that's already baked. All the decisions are made. A raw file is like having all the raw ingredients, the flour, the eggs, the sugar. It's all the original data from the camera sensor.
So much more flexibility later on.
Loads more. The guide points out a few key things. White balance, getting the colors right, is much easier to adjust in RAW. Super important indoors where you might have daylight and, say, fluorescent light mixing.
Yeah, that can look really weird if the white balance is off.
Totally. RAW lets you fix that accurately. Plus, you have way more ability to recover detail in really bright areas like skies or pull detail out of deep shadows without the image falling apart or looking weird.
And that helps with that HDR thing we mentioned too.
Absolutely. Because you have so much more information in each RAW file, blending them together for HDR looks much more natural and seamless.
Got it. RAW is the way to go for serious work. Okay, technical stuff covered. Let's get into the more artistic side composition. How do you guide the viewer's eye?
This is where it gets fun, because the architecture itself gives you tools. The guide talks a lot about leading lines.
Like staircases, pathways.
Exactly. Staircases, bridges, window frames, railings. Anything that visually pulls your eye into the photo, usually towards the main subject. For pros, this isn't just about looking nice. It's about pointing the viewer towards what's important in the building.
I can totally see that, like a long corridor just drawing you in. What else?
Framing is another good one. Using things in the foreground like a doorway, an arch, maybe some columns, to frame the main part of the building. It adds depth, like you're looking through something into the scene.
It creates layers.
Right. And the guide also mentions lining your camera up parallel to surfaces.
Why is that important?
Well, if a building is symmetrical, getting your camera perfectly aligned emphasizes that symmetry, creates a really strong sense of balance and order, or sometimes tension, depending on the subject.
Interesting. But you can also break that rule. The sources mention low or high angles.
Oh, yeah. Getting down low and looking up at a tall building makes it look absolute massive, really imposing, exaggerates the scale.
Okay, cool. Now, what about people? Sometimes you see them in architectural shots, sometimes not. How do you decide, and how do you do it well?
It's about being strategic, as the guide puts it. You don't just stick someone in randomly. People can give a sense of scale, show how big the building really is. They add context, maybe a bit of story.
So intention is key. Any specific techniques?
Well, one cool trick is using a slow shutter speed, remember the tripod, to blur people walking through the scene.
Ah, so you get the sense of life and movement, but the focus stays on the architecture.
Exactly. Keeps the building the star. The guide also suggests placing people carefully, maybe using the rule of thirds, so they balance the composition rather than distracting from it.
Right, don't let them dominate unless that's the specific point.
Precisely. And you can show interaction, someone sitting on steps, walking through a door, even just their reflection in glass. Little touches that make the space feel lived in.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's shift gears a bit. Weather. We can't control it, but how does it play into architectural shots?
Oh, hugely. Weather totally changes the mood, the light quality, reflections, colors, even whether you can get to the spot you want to shoot.
Right. The guide actually said cloudy days can be good. That surprised me.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but overcast skies give you soft, even light, no harsh shadows. That can be really helpful for buildings with shiny surfaces, like glass skyscrapers. It helps even out the exposure.
Okay, less contrast to deal with. What about actual rain or snow?
That adds drama.
Yeah.
Atmosphere. Think about reflections on wet streets after rain,
Oh, yeah, love those.
or snow dusting the details on a building. The guide even talks about shooting in fog or during storms for a really emotional, mysterious feel.
Wow. But you'd need to protect your camera then, right?
Absolutely. Good weather sealing on your gear or rain covers. Essential if you're going to be out in nasty weather for a while.
Good tip. Now let's zoom in on some specific visual elements, reflections and shadows. The guide calls them compositional gold. Strong words.
They really are valuable. Reflections puddles, shiny floors, windows that can create amazing symmetry or contrast, or just add another layer of interest. It's like getting a bonus view in the same shot.
Like a 2-for-1 deal.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And shadows are just as powerful. You can frame your shot so shadows become strong geometric shapes, extending the lines of the building.
Adding dimension.
Right. And think about negative space. Sometimes the shape of the shadow defines the building just as much as the lit parts.
That's a cool way to think about it. And capturing reflections during golden hour.
Oh, yeah. Because you get the warm light hitting the building, and maybe the reflection is showing the cooler blue sky. That warm-cool contrast can be really dynamic, really eye-catching.
Nice. Okay, we've talked big picture, but what about the little things? The guide stresses focusing on details and textures too.
Definitely. Buildings tell stories in their materials, the way things are put together. The
Yeah.
guide suggests looking for patterns, tiles, bricks, latticework, capturing that rhythm.
And you might need different gear for that.
Maybe a macro lens for super close-ups, or a telephoto lens to isolate a texture from a distance like rust on metal, or the grain in old wood, or cracks in stone.
Really getting into the character of the materials.
Exactly. And also where different materials meet, like where concrete joins glass or wood meets steel, those junctions can be really interesting visually.
So it's about building a whole story. The wide shot shows the form, the detail shots show the substance.
You got it. The guide suggests showing both together gives a much richer picture of the building.
Okay, last piece of the puzzle. Editing or post-processing. Sounds like it's not just optional for pros.
No way. Editing is where you really shape the final image, where your vision comes through. It's not about faking things, but refining. The guide suggests starting with the basics. Lens corrections, fixing perspective if you didn't use a tilt shift.
Getting those lines straight in the software.
Right. Then adjusting contrast, maybe saturation, getting the overall tones right.
And it's different for outside versus inside shots.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
Exteriors, you might need to work on the sky separately from the building, balance the light. Interiors, you're often dealing with tricky, mixed lighting, daylight, lamps, overheads. So color grading to make it look cohesive is key.
And using masks and brushes. What's that about?
Ah, that's for making targeted adjustments. So say the windows are blown out, too bright, you can use a mask to just select the windows and bring back detail there without making the whole room darker.
Very precise control.
Exactly. And finally, don't forget black and white. The guide mentions it's great for emphasizing shape, line, shadow, especially with more minimalist architecture.
Right, strips away the distraction of color sometimes. So it really is a whole process, isn't it? From
Yeah,
scouting the light to that final edit, it all works together.
it really does. Professional architectural photography isn't just pointing and shooting. It's intentional. It takes skill.
Hmm.
Understanding light, knowing your gear, thinking about composition, refining in post.
So the big takeaway for you listening is that moving from snapshots to really compelling architectural photos involves applying these ideas deliberately. It's about learning to see and capture space, shape, and light in a more thoughtful way.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. How can you blend your unique way of seeing things with these techniques? Try going back to a building you know well, but this time, look at it with these tips in mind. See what you discover. You might surprise yourself.